Hello, Vinny here. I just wanted to take a few moments to go through my pull request that I have submitted, previously called OpenStack deprovision. I've renamed the actual playbook to Terminate. So I'm going to go through what functions this provides and give a little warm and fuzzy feeling as to what instances it will delete and some of the checks in place to make sure that you don't delete instances that shouldn't be deleted. So first of all, I have an environment here. I happen to be the only user with instances in this particular project, but I have created a few using two different base images. We'll take a look at the OSE3 base image uses the root user, while this guest image uses the cloud user. So the reason this is important is I found if you try to delete instances that have different images, you're going to need to specify different SSH users. Otherwise, the SSH tasks, such as subscription manager unregister, will not function on whichever user is not specified. So we're going to demonstrate that, look at the checks in place for that, and also have, as you see here, a cluster name do not delete. So we're going to make sure that this guy stays up, and we'll go through the various matches and checks that are in place. So I'm going to take a look very quickly at the code itself. We're not going to go through every line in detail, but essentially we're setting a default SSH user for Ansible of root. We discussed in the Slack channel that we probably want to change this to cloud-user, and I'll make those changes at the same time once this PR is accepted. But I have carried over the variables from the previous bash script. So we have the max instances set to 6, the minimum environment length set to 8, and I've added this override. I'm calling it really sure. By default, this is set to false, but you can override that. And also have a dry run in here. Now, there's a couple of extra variables. There's a UUID regex. This is just used to match later on. Okay, so there's some standard environment checks here. We want to make sure that we've identified or that we've provided an environment ID or we've provided the override if we haven't. And checking the credentials for OpenStack to make sure we have a good connection, which is similar to a PR that I put in for the OpenStack create. And then we want to match and find out how many instances that we have. Now, there's one little trick that I'm pointing out here, and that's the reason I'm going through this, is if the environment ID provided doesn't match any instances, this length count here will actually just be an empty string, but Python counts that as a length of 1. So here I'm just setting that to 0, essentially, by double checking if that string itself is empty. Otherwise, it will appear as if there is a match when there, in fact, is not. And then we do a too many instance check and so forth. So let me scroll down a little bit further. You can obviously check out the code yourself. Here is a check to see if there are unique images or not. So the way I'm achieving this is up in this stance here, I'm taking the images, the instances that are specified to be deleted, essentially constructing a variable containing all of the unique images or all of the images for each instance. Then we are just grabbing the first image and setting that as kind of the reference image. And then we loop through all of our images and detect if those match. If they don't, we'll set this fact here to true that images differ, and then we'll pop up this warning. So essentially, images used have been detected as not being unique, may potentially have different users. So there's an opportunity to ignore that and continue forward, or Control-C to cancel. And there's a recommendation to use images that are the same across the cluster to delete those in batch. So that's just a little bit of a warning, just a use case that I encountered when I had different images. Then we build a custom host group containing the information that we've gathered. So the host name, the IP address itself, the SSH user, and the group itself. Now here is where there is a bit of a warm and fuzzy. I felt this was important since we are deleting objects in the environment that's shared. Whether we've specified a dry run, you see this variable here, you can specify it is defaulted to false, but you can set this to true. Then whether you specify that or not, it's going to stop here in prompt. So with the dry run, you're going to see a little bit more information. But essentially, this is letting you know that it's going to be viewing the tasks versus actually deleting. So we could just have one prompt here, but I didn't want to alarm anyone who's running a dry run that is being told that it's going to actually delete. There is one debug output of the actual host variables for the collected instances, but that's only if there's a dry run. And then the rest is just pretty standard. So we have a subscription manager unregister. Now this is What we learned is if we're using cloud-user, we do have to set this Ansible sudo to true. So that is set regardless. So if we're using the root user, this does not have a negative impact. Then we delete the instance, we wait for the volume to be unattached, and then we delete the volume. So this is similar to what was done in the bash script. The only issue I've seen with this task here would be if OS1 or whatever backend environment is having issues and not responding properly. And this would obviously not complete successfully, so it will time out. So we may want to talk about adjusting the retries or the delays here. But if that instance is stuck in a deleting state or ends up in an error state, this will time out. So what I'm doing here is, I think in the previous bash script there was a check for available or error. Here I'm basically checking for the volume status of in use to go away. So it's kind of the same check, but we can discuss modifying that. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to demonstration here. Again, I've got my instances running. So let's just go ahead and start just a run without any parameters and see what happens. So I'm going to do Ansible Playbook and then specify we have this playbook down in OpenStack, and it's now called Terminate. So if I run this without any parameters, the checks are going to kick in. So there's no environment ID set, so it's refusing to delete without some sort of match. Okay, so as I said, we can override this, but we're not going to go there yet. Let's go ahead and provide some information. So now I know that I have Castle V. Valdez in my name, but let's go ahead and start with this short character length of the actual environment ID. So right now, we're providing feedback to the user that the count is only 4 characters long. Risk of deleting too many instances, which is true here. So if we do override that, we can get an idea of what type of count that this would provide us. So let's go ahead and we do have here in the feedback the minimum length, so the variable they can override. So we can do that, and let's set it to, what do we have it at 4? So we can do that. So now we've passed that check. There's a sufficient length check. We've gotten past that, and now we're hitting another check. So that short environment ID is matching 15 instances. So again, risk of deleting too many instances. So we could, again, override this with that same variable, max instances, but let's not do that. What I would like to do instead is provide a more specific search. So let's go ahead and try the Valdez. So there's 15 instances that match that. So let's go ahead and override that max instance count. So again, this is provided here to the user so that they'll know exactly what variable to override. So we'll set that to 15. Now, as I said, it's safe to execute these commands even without a dry run because it will not proceed unless you confirm at the prompt. Okay, so we hit our first warning here. So this is the unique image match. So this is telling me, and you can look at the feedback here, that we found several instances using the guest image, and then we found others using the OSE 3.1 base image. So there's the warning message, recommended here that the environments are deleted in batch of matching unique images. And then here I'm doing a unique set against the 2 found and just informing the user of the various images found. So at this point, we could hit enter and go to the next step. In fact, I'll show you what that'll look like because I haven't done a dry run. But this is what the standard warning will look like, given that you do have a unique image set across all your instances. So this is where the new line formatting comes into play here. So we're informing the user of all of the instance IDs, all of the instance names, the IPs that are associated with those, the volumes, and then again the matching images. So this is really intended to make sure that you are confident that the objects you're going to be deleting are the ones you intend to delete. So I'm going to go ahead and Control-C out of that. I haven't actually done anything yet. Now I'm going to go ahead and just specify dry run. Now this is going to be very similar, but I'm going to go ahead and click through the prompt that we see here in a minute, and then just confirm that no objects are actually deleted. And while that's running, I can come over here and just double check. I still have all of my instances. Okay, we've got 18 total. So that was the 15 that matched Castle, and then the 3 additional that I have called Do Not Delete. Okay, here we notice the same information that we saw before, but this time that we're informing the user they're just going to view the tasks rather than actually delete them. Okay, so there's the run. If we scroll up a little bit, here's the debug I mentioned. So using the dry run, we are going to debug all of the data that's captured in terms of the host group and all the matching instances. And then what's handy about the dry run is we're simply skipping the tasks. So we'll actually see what instances would have been operated on. So we can go back and we can match that against our either Nova list output or the Horizon UI and just double check that these are the IDs and instances that we want to delete. Okay, so let's go ahead and do an actual run this time. So we're going to go ahead and specify similar variable here for environment ID, but I want to make that a little bit more unique. So if I take a look at my different environments here, I've got sets of 3 nodes in here. Now I've taken note of which ones are using which images, and I also have some that have used Subscription Manager to register and some that have not. So what I'd like to demonstrate is that it's going to attempt to unregister whether that system has been registered or not, and we're going to ignore errors in that case. So let's go ahead and start with this environment. So this is a cluster that is using the guest image, so it's going to be using the cloud user, and it is subscribed to Subscription Manager. Okay, now you notice that was a lot quicker. Obviously, when we're searching 15 instances and iterating through Nova list multiple times, Nova volume list, and doing matches, and then Nova show, that does take a bit of time. When you're deleting smaller environments, that is going to be much quicker. So here we go. We have the matching environment IDs with the 7 SIT. We have the master node 1 and node 2. The IP addresses, and they're all using a unique image. So you notice we didn't get prompted here. This warning skipped because notice that there is one unique image. So let's go ahead and delete this. The debug task there was skipped since we're not running dry run. And this here is where we're attempting to unregister from Subscription Manager. So this is, in my opinion, one of the most important functions of this playbook is reclaiming those subscriptions. So this is a good message here. And you notice that I should be using the cloud-user rather than the default of root. So that's something I mentioned at the top of this screencast, is that we do want to change that default. But I did this to demonstrate that you will have to supply that user. And it's probably best practice to supply that anyway, since we are dynamically creating the inventory. Okay, so this shouldn't take too long. Confirming my information is correct. And this time we should be able to unregister. Very good. Now we're deleting the instances and then waiting for the volumes to become available. Okay, so if I come back to my Horizon interface, I see that my list of items has reduced to 15. I could also do a Nova list and look for that unique ID, which should be gone. Okay, so we know this worked as desired. We have our other instances, we have the do not delete, and we have the other environments as well. So let's go ahead and look at what happens when you do not have a subscription on the system itself and we want to delete that. So let's go ahead and try it now. So the only difference in this case is that the Subscription Manager unregister should fail. And we'll notice that that does not cause the task to exit. So that should continue on. Now that's different from the previous error we saw, which was that we were not able to SSH at all. So in this case, we see that the output was a return code of 1 during this unregister because the system was not currently registered. So that's totally fine. We're going to ignore that and we're just going to move on. Okay. Again, just to verify, we're down to 12 items. And that cluster is now gone. The last demonstration I'm going to do is deleting multiple clusters. Now these do happen to be using the same image. If we double check in Horizon, we see these are all OSE3 1 base, so we don't need the root user. So let's go ahead and run this command again. This time I'm going to just reduce this to Castle V Valdez. I want to delete everything in my environment, and I am really, really sure about that. Okay. Yeah, I was really, really, really sure. Let's wait for the coffee to kick in. A little bit too sure on that one. Okay, here's a summary. And as you can imagine, with even more instances, if you're trying to clean up an entire environment, this output can get a little verbose, but I think the more information, the better in this instance, where we want to make sure that we're not trashing other people's environments. So I can see here, I do not have my do not delete cluster, which is great. We expect it for that to remain. So here's an interesting part. We're going to see a mix of successful changed tasks and some failed. And there we go. So I have my cluster running that I did not touch, that I did not want to delete. And I hope this instills some confidence that this Terminate playbook will do what it's supposed to do and not touch other environments. Thank you.